Welcome to Impact Farming, where we introduce you to the people and ideas that will have a massive impact on your farming operation. Brought to you by Farm Marketer. Sit down, start the engine, and let's roll with today's show.
Hello and welcome back to another episode of the Impact Farming Show. Today I have the always amazing Gerry Friesen returning to the show. Welcome back, Gerry. How are you?
Hey, Tracy. It's great to be chatting with you again. I always enjoy these.
Me too. I am very excited to have you back on the show to be talking about mental health and stress and how it impacts our management decisions as farmers. As we all know, it's been a crazy year. So I think this is very timely and I'm excited to dive in. Before I do, can you share a little bit more about who you are, what you do, so that our audience can get to know you a little better?
Just a comment on what you just said. Wouldn't it be nice if someday for 12 months, you and I wouldn't have to talk about mental health and agriculture?
I know.
Everything was just going great.
I know. When I reached out to you, I said, hey, Gerry, we need to do some mental health episodes. And then I'm like, honestly, this is an annual thing. And, you know, I love farming and we'll do a little chat here, but I love farming. You're a recovering farmer, but man, can farming take a toll on you mentally and physically? Because I joked with my husband, it always seems to be the crisis of the year. What is happening this year? I know we love what we do, but is there any more difficult profession out there?
Well, and that's, what is it? The World Health Organization talks about farming being one of the most stressful occupations, and it is.
It is. Yeah. If it's not too dry, it's too wet. If it's not any of the weather related, it's going to be trade issues. Oh, yeah.
Yeah, for sure.
So here we are.
So sorry.
That was perfect. That was actually perfect because, you know, I was thinking about that after I emailed you and I said, it's always something, but, you know, on a positive note, we have the platform here. I'm so excited to bring out great guests like you to help support our audience because what we do is hard. It's important. And I love that I can take the wisdom from minds like yours and put out episodes to serve our audience and help them be happy mentally, right?
Yeah, absolutely. We need to do what we can. And you and I talked before we started about the fact that, you know, we're talking about stress and mental health again. And I commiserated, for lack of a better word, about, you know, we'll be probably rehashing a lot of the stuff we've talked about in other conversations. But really, at the end of the day, you know what? I have with my own personal journey, I've heard a lot of this, you know, repeat stuff. And every time I hear something, it's a reminder that, oh yeah, that's something I can do. That's something I need to do. And so it's always good to hear stuff because any little tidbit, and it's surprising how sometimes one little tidbit that we've probably heard 4 or 5 times before, suddenly we key in on it and we go, wow, that was helpful.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Okay. Before we dive in, do you want to tell our audience who you are?
Well, I'm Gerry Friesen, aka the Recovering Farmer. You know what? I used to farm. It didn't end well, but it ended. Through life, I started doing other stuff. I do a lot of conflict management work. Dealt with a lot of farmers and farm debt, facing financial stressors. And quite frankly, while I was still on the farm, I began my own journey with mental illness. And it's a journey that continues today. And that's why I say, you know what? I have to have reminders every once in a while of things I need to do when I find myself slipping and stress overwhelms. And so my stressors are different now, but it's still something we have to be aware of.
Absolutely. Thank you for sharing. And that's one of the reasons I love having you on the show. You've walked the path, you've had hard times, you've come out, you work with farmers, you help farmers. So you're such a valuable guest, and I do appreciate your time. Why don't we talk about where we're at right now? I know we've actually had a few challenging years. Do you want to just speak to that a little bit and set the stage for where we're at as an industry?
You know, it's interesting you asked that, and quite frankly, I mean, the topic for the last number of months has been the drought we're in. I actually chuckled a wee bit this morning because I know in our area here over the weekend we had, I believe, somewhere close to 4 inches of rain, and then suddenly you start hearing on social media, well, the drought is over, and well, no, it isn't. You know what? A lot of the rain is good. Nobody's complaining about the rain, but for crops, for example, it's a little bit too late. It may help for pastures. The issue, Tracy, of course, as you well know, is it's an accumulation, right? I remember probably 2 years ago now, or close to 2 years ago, when we talked about rail blockades and grain not going to market, and farmers couldn't get propane in to dry their grain, and there were ongoing issues. And then just about when we thought we were over that, the pandemic hit. And initially it was, well, is it really going to affect farmers? And wow, it had a huge effect. And if it wasn't for, buying seed and fertilizer in different ways, it was changing our plans because of consumer demands changed. Yeah. And so while we're in the midst of that, I'm not going to say we entered a drought, because I just dealt with a farmer a couple of weeks ago from the Red River Valley who's in his 3rd or 4th year of drought. It's been dry for a long time. And so it just seems to be an accumulation. And it's like a lot of other things in life, right? We get to the point where we're scared to look around the corner because we're not sure what's going to hit us next.
Yeah.
Absolutely. And so that's stress. And yes, we talk about drought, and of course that affects grain farmers. We've heard a lot about a lot of cattle being sold in Western Canada because pastures are dried up or have been eaten by grasshoppers, as it were. It's not that long ago that hog producers were going through issues. Like it's just these issues that keep hitting farmers, and sometimes in different sectors, but eventually we're all just kind of sitting back and going, wow, what next?
And one thing I want to add on, because I'm getting a little bit frustrated, or maybe it's boiling up in me as well. Yes, we farm. Yes, we're out in the fields, in the pastures. So the pandemic doesn't quite hit us as farmers quite the same as it does people going to offices. But you know what? I'm gonna stop the cart right there. I think we really, as people, as an industry, have shrugged off the effects of the pandemic, because many of us do have kids. We have community activities. We like to take holidays as our way to reward ourselves and relax. And you know what? The uncertainty and the going back into the 4th wave, goodness knows where we're at now, on top of everything else that we're facing as farmers, I think if you have a light at the end of the tunnel, whether that's a trip or whether that's just the stability of your life, and your kids can go into sports, you can curl, that can help you cope a little bit better, I think, with everything that happens in the farm world. But to me, it seems like the rug is pulled out from us as farmers, from under our feet. And then we want to put on our regular person hat, and that rug is ripped from under our feet. And where do you go for stability? And maybe I'm getting a little bit personal, but that's how I'm feeling. On top Absolutely. Of everything farming, this pandemic is doing a number on mental health.
Oh, without question, Tracy. And you talk about, well, yes, during the growing season, of course, for grain farmers, we're busy out in the fields and doing what we do. We look forward to winter when there's going to be a little bit of a reprieve from that busyness. But what we also did, and what I really noticed on social media last winter, was all these farmers out there going, wow, you know what? It used to be in the wintertime we could go to conferences, to ag days, to agribition, to on and on and on, because that's where they make that connection to other people. That's where they get together and share stories.
Yeah.
And by sharing stories is how we survive. We can't survive on our own, but we can survive if we have that human connection, which is so incredibly important.
Yeah, I hear you. I wanted to acknowledge that because I don't think it's fair that I guess we try and be positive, and I always am, but I think we're tending to underestimate the effect that the pandemic is having on top of everything
Absolutely.
else we face, right?
For sure.
Maybe I just had to vent, Gerry. I feel better. Thank you.
That's good. Perfect. I'll send you the bill.
There we go. See, this is how I get free therapy. Oh, shoot.
Exactly.
Okay, focus, Tracy. Okay, on that note, thank you for hearing me out on that. Why don't we go back to the mental health survey? I think that's always a great point to reflect back to and share some of those stats to share how staggering mental health concerns are in agriculture.
Well, and they are staggering, Tracy. And the survey I'm going to refer to is the one that was actually done in 2016,
Okay.
which is a little aged by now. Actually, the U of Guelph with Dr. Andrea Jones-Bitten has been in the process of doing another one. I'm really curious what that one will show. A lot of the data I see in this one, I compared to 2006, I believe it was, when the Canadian Agricultural Safety Association did one. But what really struck me is, and if I can just tell you what the numbers are, the one that was done in 2016, 45% of producers were classified as having high stress. 58% of producers met the criteria for anxiety classification. And when I read that, I actually made a phone call to a colleague to say, what does that mean? Met the criteria for anxiety classification. And the long and short of it is if that person would go see a professional like a psychiatrist or a psychologist, they would be diagnosed with an anxiety disorder.
Wow.
And so over half the farmers met that classification. And that's huge in my mind because, of course, everyone has anxiety to a degree. And of course, we feel anxious when, the weather isn't cooperating or the markets aren't cooperating or there's another trade action like you talked about before. And so we naturally come by this anxiety, but to actually be classified, as having an anxiety disorder is very, very concerning for me. And I sometimes try and think back and go, well, 2016 is 5 years ago. What were the main stressors then? And I'm sure they were there. But like we just talked about, we've got some fairly major ones right now. So that's why I'm really curious what the new one will show. The other number was 35% of producers met the criteria for a depression classification.
Yikes.
So again, those are really concerning numbers, and numbers that we have to be aware of, not because we have to panic now because these numbers are there, but rather that we have to be aware of these numbers so that we can reach out and help others, but that others that are going through these situations also have the freedom to reach out and get help.
I think it cannot be said enough. It helps to hear that you're not alone.
Absolutely.
People didn't know these stats and they're like, oh my gosh, I'm the only one feeling this. I'm the only one anxious or depressed. Then you'll just clamp up, right? But I think the entire industry has been doing such a good job of normalizing this conversation.
Yes.
And if you go, oh, okay, there's others, you don't feel so isolated.
Yes, yes, absolutely. And as rural residents, as farms get further and further apart, just by the way our population is moving around, we're isolated to begin with. And then we do a lot of our work we do on our own. We're isolated. Pandemic, we couldn't connect with other people, so we're still alone. And so, yes, the key message that I often give producers is talk to others. Talk to others. And I referred to a story, and I'm not sure I've shared it with you, Tracy, but back when 2005, when I was sliding downhill a little too fast, a neighbor dropped by and just out of the blue asked me how I was doing. And instead of my usual answer, well, not bad or okay or whatever, I actually started talking. And to have a neighbor sitting there who didn't provide advice or give answers, but rather sat and listened and normalized and validated what I was feeling, just took a huge load off my back, because I was verbalizing a lot of these thoughts that were going on in my head. So that talking about it helps.
Yeah. And the weird part is, I find anyways, and I think it depends on different personalities and maybe male and female. Often you don't want to, I'm not one that wants to talk about my troubles. And maybe I do need a period of time, but I think for many, it's natural. If you're bothered, why do you want to maybe burden somebody? But also you don't want to talk about it. So you just clam up, right?
Exactly. That's our normal tendency to do that, for sure.
Okay. Which doesn't help us at all, right?
No. And that's why, and I love this awareness that's grown in Western Canada, for sure. It's, through the work that FCC has done, Doomerag has done, people talking about it more. And I've seen such a switch from 2010, when I first started talking about it, where people were hesitant to approach me. And if I was asked by an organization to do a presentation, they would say, and we'll leave 10 minutes for a Q&A. And I would sometimes chuckle and say, yeah, you can do that, but nobody's going to ask me anything, because people wouldn't be, the stigma, right?
Yeah.
But that's changed over the last few years, where I've had people get up and admit in their own vulnerability about stuff they're facing and challenges they have, and wanting to know how they can get better.
That's impressive.
Oh, it's so good to see. Absolutely.
And really at the end of the day, it's crazy that there's even a stigma, and everything has its time. But you know what? If we broke our arm or had cancer, we wouldn't bat an eye to help others. We wouldn't judge others. But because we have some health issues in our head, we feel self-conscious about it, right? So to me, it's not even a second thought. You have physical health, you have mental health. You need both to be healthy, right?
Exactly. And it's just like you say, and I dealt with a farmer a few years ago, and as we were sitting around the kitchen table talking about life, he started talking about how this financial stress he was facing was affecting him. And he said, I get up in the morning, I go to the barn, and I can't remember what it was, but he talked about this a wee bit. And I said, man, you got to go get some help for that, because you're starting, the stress and anxiety and stuff that you're experiencing is really starting to overwhelm you, and you need to seek professional help. And he looked at me and he says, well, can't I just go see my pastor? And this isn't anything bad about going to see your pastor. That's all good. But I looked at him and I said, well, if you broke your leg, would you go see your pastor, or would you go see a doctor? Because it's like you say, yes, talking to a pastor, talking to counselors, absolutely, it's helpful, without a question. But at the end of the day, we still need to seek that professional help.
Absolutely. One day, Gerry, we're going to see a time where talking to somebody, a doctor, what's the correct term, psychologist, where there's not going to be a stigma about that. I would love it if we could just naturally have that, where we go in, we have a checkup, the doctor asks how you're doing, you can talk to somebody, because the crazy thing, exactly like you just said, not everybody's trained in how the mind works. Not everybody's a great listener. People have great intentions, but not everybody's fully equipped to listen and provide advice on how to help you with your mental health, right?
Right. And an important piece there, Tracy, which shows up in the survey that you of Guelph did, but also in the CASA one done in 2006, is the farmers overwhelmingly expressed the wish, the desire to be able to talk to a professional who knew about the intricacies of farming.
Amen.
And that is such an important piece. And someone just anecdotally told me a while ago, they were feeling the stress. They went to seek the help of went to see their doctor and talked about it. Well, the doctor got out his pad and wrote him a sick note, said, take 2 weeks off. Well, sorry, I'm a farmer.
Yeah.
My crop's out in the field. My cattle are calving, whatever the case may have been in that case. No, I can't take time off. So the profession, he went to seek professional help, but when the professional help doesn't understand the intricacies of his occupation, his or her occupation, are they being helped?
Yeah.
And so just on, and sorry, now I'm going to veer off of what I said I would talk to you about.
Please do. This is stuff.
But in the last year, it came to our attention that there's actually programs called farmer wellness programs. One on Prince Edward Island, it's been started now, and there's 5 or 6 or 7 counties in Ontario that are offering this. Actually, myself and another person who shall remain nameless at this point are trying to work on something like that for Manitoba too, where farmers get, free 4 or 6 sessions per year with a professional that's very familiar with agriculture, because we need that. Yes, we have the farm line, but quite honestly, it moved from Brandon to Winnipeg a year ago, and they're a farm line in name only, because the majority of the people answering the calls, yes, they're good counselors. I won't take that away from them, but they don't know anything about farming. And so we need to get that going in a bigger, better way, particularly with all the stress that's happening in agriculture these days.
Yeah. It seems every year we need it more and more, right? Since I started this show, we just celebrated the end of our 3rd year. We're going into our 4th year. Since I have started this show, and we've been talking about this, and I've been interviewing people like you, I would say a lot of the farming industry has gotten even more, what's the right word? Hectic, challenging, trying.
Absolutely.
Right? It hasn't gotten easier. We haven't had easier years. And yes, there's pockets and places that are having bumper crops, but I'm looking Western Canada. My goodness, most of us are on 3-4 years of dry, nailed with drought.
But even if there was no drought, even if things were going well, farming has changed so much over the years, Tracy. Every day when a farmer gets up, I saw the numbers some time ago, how many major decisions they have to make on a daily basis.
Yes.
And those are life-altering decisions.
Yeah.
And I say that may be overstating it. It's business altering decisions they have to make.
Well, and not only that, let's kind of name it how it is. The debt level of farms are incredibly high. I mean, there's always been farms that have high debt, but everything's so expensive. Farming operations are getting bigger. And as a business owner, the more you're in debt, the more stress you have. If everything was paid off and you have a drought, well, you know what? Hiccup and you carry on. But farmers out here, ourselves, the amount of debt that we're under, you can't afford a lot of hiccups, right?
Well, exactly. And so here, let me go into the stress aspect a little bit. Yes. Normally, I have a few quotes for you. I've got one now, but I have to read it. I don't have it memorized yet, but it's key. And this is actually something that Farm Management Canada, as a result of what Agriculture and Agri-Food Canada did a couple of years ago, where the government keyed into the stress in agriculture and what they needed to do. The Standing Committee on Agriculture, but then Farm Management Canada did a study in how stress impacts farming. And what they said in that study, they suggested that typically when we make choices, we think about the pros and cons of each decision we have to make. We reflect on past experiences, but stress has the ability to cloud a logical approach. And then we run the risk of making less rational decisions. In times of stress, we are more likely to overlook negative information, that may influence our decisions and will rather focus on a positive outcome from the past. Research has shown that rational, emotionally stable, and conscientious farmers are more likely to have a profitable business.
Mm.
And I remember that when things were tough and I was a hog farmer, and when markets weren't going the right way and feed prices were going up and it was tough to make our balance sheet work. And then we wanted to use risk management programs. And by that time, my stress was overwhelming me. So instead of, reading what the actual current information was, I would think back to 2 or 3 years previously when I had done something and that had worked well. So I thought, well, if I do it now again, it'll turn out well for me too. So I wasn't making decisions based on the right information. I was making it on something that had made me feel good a few years ago.
Yeah.
And so that's that effect that stress can have on us.
That makes sense. I'm reflecting back to different times in Farm Marketer, my media company, where I was hectic, lots coming at me, and then at the farm. And then you get out of that period and it's calm. And then you go, well, why did I do that?
Yes.
Had I been a little calmer, quieter, I probably would have made a little bit different decision, right?
Yeah, exactly.
We only have so much bandwidth up here.
And I'll give you the answer on how to address that a little later when we get to that point. But it's just, I think, again, it's people don't understand. And when we talk about stress, it's often, we're starting to feel things in our body that don't feel right. And we just assume, well, I'm getting older. And so I have different aches and pains. And so I can't sleep at nights. And that's because I had coffee or, all these things are happening to us. And we have to be aware of the fact that just may be the fact that we're experiencing a lot of stress. And so there's that awareness piece again.
Yeah, absolutely. Okay, so you touched a little bit about how stress affects our decision making. Do you have anything you want to add there yet?
Well, there's a few key pieces that I sometimes talk about.
Okay.
What happens when stress takes over, and often what can happen is we capitulate. We start making decisions just simply because we can't stand worrying about it anymore. So my pasture is dried up. I'm not sure what to do with cattle. And instead of being able to try and work our way through this and think about what the options might be, we just go, well, we're going to sell the cattle. Just get it over with, right? Sometimes we find ourselves going into denial or burying our head in the sand, and we just go, well, this can't be happening. And again, on social media, and I've mentioned social media to you 3 or 4 times today, and I hate social media, so you're probably wondering why. But I do read a lot of stuff on social media, and it's people that go, well, I can't deliver my crop, and yet they're charging me because I had a contract, and how dare they do that? Well, you know what? It's a denial of what the reality of the world is. And so we have to be aware of that. We become obsessed and we just can't quit thinking about it, right? We talk about waking up at nights, and what's the first thought that hits us is that thing that was stressing me out when I went to sleep, and my brain could take a break, but we wake up and there it is again. And so whether it's the crop that stayed out in the field last year because winter came early, or because another trade deal that's going to mess up markets, whatever it is, we just become obsessed with it.
Yeah.
Sometimes we're paralyzed because we're unable to make any choices because each choice seems to be too fraught with danger. And so we're paralyzed. We don't make any choices. And I often say not making a decision is a decision in itself. And so we have to, again, be aware. One of the things that I've read about is that sometimes we become paranoid when we're under a lot of stress.
Okay.
And I don't often talk about that, but we get to the point where there's something like there must be an evil force out there, or there's conspiracy theories, right? And so then especially with the conspiracy QAnon that we've heard about and conspiracy theories, I kind of looked into that a wee bit, and I started realizing that is exactly what is happening to people, is that apparently when your psychological needs aren't being met, you start delving into conspiracy theories. And guess what? When we're under a lot of stress, our psychological needs aren't being met. If we can't make human connections during the winter when we have some time off, our psychological needs aren't being met. If our relationships are being broken because of all the stress, our psychological needs aren't being met. And so we start coming up with all kinds of wonky ideas of, what's going on here.
That makes sense.
Yeah, there's so much of this stuff that again, I've said this so often today and in the past, it's a matter of being aware of what's happening so you can be proactive in dealing with it.
As you're sharing the different things that happen, I'm like, been there. Yep, I hear you, Gerry.
And you know what? I think everybody has been, Tracy.
Yeah.
But again, just a note here is I've often admitted to the fact that I was not able to deal with stress in the same way that a lot of my friends, colleagues had. Back in the 90s when I would go to agricultural meetings or whatever, and someone would say, well, I have to go home tonight and fix whatever in his barn. I would go, how can you be so relaxed about that? I wouldn't even have come today if I had had that issue in my barn, right? But to them, that was just, they had the tolerance to deal with it. And so everybody has a different tolerance level when it comes to stress.
Yes. I would say, I think something I learned about this, Gerry, me and my learnings and my left curves here and my rabbit trails. I'm doing a rabbit trail right away, but not so much. I mean, personality types. To me, I learned a lot about the different personality styles in business training. And I've actually done an episode about that, but I think that awareness is crucial. And not only that awareness between spouses as well, realizing how your spouse operates, because, different people are more sociable or not, can handle more stress or not. Different people are okay with talking it out, and others have no desire to even share the inner workings of their mind because they're introverted or whatever we want to call it. So being aware of who you are and how you operate, I think, is important. It takes some stress off, but I think also having that awareness, if you're that type of person, you're not going to want to reach out and you're going to just spin and spin, right?
Well, we do, but here's that little piece of magic that can work. Okay. And there's not, when it comes to mental health, a lot of it is trial and error, and there often isn't an easy fix, although there usually is a fix. But when you talk about that self-awareness, and I can't emphasize enough, Tracy, I mentioned this before, I'll mention it again, is when we become obsessed, or when we go through what you just mentioned, it's in our brain, right? And so we start worrying, for example. What's worrying? It's creating something you don't want to have happen. But if you keep worrying, that's exactly what you're doing. And so when we're able to talk things through, and very often it's a matter of just verbalizing the thoughts in your head, because even as they start coming out of my mouth when I do that, I start thinking about how ridiculous was I in even thinking that?
Yep.
Right? And so we verbalize this, it comes out of our head, we verbalize it, we get to realize what's real and what isn't, and that makes life so much easier.
Yeah.
But again, it's that self-awareness piece.
I, believe it or not, am not a big talker. Oh, geez, you make that same face whenever I say that. I talk for my profession. I chat on the show. But when I'm troubled, worried, I don't naturally seek out a conversation. I need a process. I withdraw. I'll chat about it if appropriate. But I also know when I open up, even though it seems like it's pointless, like, why am I going to talk about this? They don't have the answer, whatever. But for me, you talk about it exactly like you just said. It just does two things. You go, oh, something about saying it and hearing it. And that's number one. it clicks in your brain. And then number two, I've seen myself and other people go, oh, it's just literally, if you don't want to talk about it, I know many people worse than me that don't want to talk about stuff. And I have seen them just do a verbal dump of everything on their mind and then do that big deep breath and go, they actually said, man, talking does help.
Absolutely, for sure.
Yeah, it's crazy. Anyways, and we always assume women love to chat and men don't or whatever it is. But I think that awareness piece is so important, right?
Absolutely. And so that self-awareness is, of course, one way to respond to when we're feeling the stress.
Yes.
The second one is don't ignore issues. And I went through this myself. A lot of the farmers I've dealt with have gone through this. Friends, family, I've heard other people talk about it. And just to put it in perspective, I'll give you a story about a farmer I met with, and we were compiling his financial information to get ready for a farm debt meeting. And we had gone through his bills that he needed to pay and stuff. And then there was one piece, so that he had got someone to do some custom work for him. And so we asked him what that was, what the amount was. And he said, well, I don't know. And I said, have you not received the bill? And he said, yeah, I got it 2 weeks ago. But he said, I haven't opened the envelope.
Yeah.
And I said, so why didn't you open the envelope? And he said, because I'm scared of what it'll be.
Yeah.
And I said, here's a challenge for you. Go get the envelope right now, open it up and look at it. And I said, regardless of what the number is on that invoice, you will feel better. And he looked at me and he says, you're crazy. And I said, try it. So he went and he opened the envelope. He looked at the number. It was a little higher than he had expected. But he looked at me and he said, how did you know that I would feel better? And I said, because I've gone through this. And I said, what has shifted in your head now is instead of sitting and worrying about what that number is, you see the number and automatically your head shifts into a different space where you're going, okay, this is the number. How can I deal with it?
Yeah.
And so we can't ignore issues. We have to deal with it. We can't bury our head in the sand. And sometimes, trust me, it's so much easier burying your head in the sand. The issue is when you pull your head out, the issue is still there.
Well, and Gerry, I think that's such an important point, especially in agriculture where our income is seasonal. Correct me if I'm wrong. For my media company, I have monthly income, monthly expenses. I open my bills, sign them off, send them to accounting, pay them. Easy peasy, because there's income coming in every month. But for farmers, and I've heard this before, well, you only sell cabs in the fall. You only get your income for your crops in the fall. Having bills pile up when you don't have the revenue to match at that moment, that can be very stressful.
You exactly. So you have that sitting there. Your crop isn't coming off for another month or two, and you're looking out the window and there's a hailstorm coming your way, right? Or your cows are just calving and it now looks like the markets aren't going to be that great in fall. In the meantime, the bills are piling up and you're starting to go, how am I going to pay for this?
Yeah.
And again, you start worrying, right? And all this stuff building up in your head, because a lot of what we often imagine, the worrying piece, is we're making up stuff. And it may be real, it may not be. You know Mark Twain or whoever it was that said, I had so many problems in life, most of which never happened.
I love that one.
I do too, because it's so true.
Yeah. Our brains tend to, what are they is that survival mechanism, that lizard brain? They're always trying to keep you safe. So they're your brain scanning for all the potential problems and creating problems in your mind, and you just worry, right? And then most of them, fortunately, never happen. Yeah, I heard that quote many years ago. I'm like, oh, isn't that true? How many times have I worried about stuff?
I think actually, Tracy, you and I use that quote every time we talk.
I think so. When you said it, I'm like, oh yeah. But Gerry, I don't have any quotes for you this time. I feel like I'm slacking.
Yeah. The other piece we have to be aware of is our expectations. And I can still recall going through this where I would have certain expectations, and you go, well, I'm going to do this today because next week my income will be better. And so we keep having these high expectations. And here's another quote for you: high expectations lead to future resentment. Because we keep having these high expectations and they don't happen, and that's when we start getting angry, and of course conspiracy and all that stuff starts happening. So we have to make sure our expectations are realistic. I know from experience, my own self, and also from a lot of farmers I deal with, you can fool a banker for so and so long, and then finally they're going to look at you and say, well, no. And I remember walking into the banker's office and saying, yeah, I know it's tight right now. I'm going to need a little bit of an extension on my line of credit, but here's a projection I've done. And so they look at the projection going, yeah, okay. And 3 months later, I'm back in there doing the same thing again, because those projections, which, dealing with a farmer, and he says, well, I'm going to have an 80 bushel per acre canola crop. And I don't even know if that's a realistic number, but let's go with that. And you look at him and say, well, have you ever had 80 acres per acre before? Well, no, but this year it looks really good. Well, sorry, let's tone down your expectations, because you're not going to fool anybody with that, right? So make sure your expectations are realistic so you're not that disappointed.
Yeah, that makes sense. Crazy.
And then last but not least, we've talked about talking about it. We need to feel freer about seeking the advice of a third party.
Yes.
And I know farmers, if they could talk to me face to face after I say that, go, well, yeah, but that guy, all he does is sell me fertilizer and he thinks his fertilizer is the best. And now, that's not what I'm talking about. Experts are experts in one field only. And so, no, you want to have a business advisor you can talk to that can sit and make sure, as you talk things through, that your expectations are realistic. Make sure that you're not ignoring issues. Make sure that you're aware of what your situation is, and then help you talk through a plan. Because again, I can sit and scheme up a plan, no problem. But is it realistic? Probably not. But if I sit and talk with someone like you, Tracy, for example, with your expertise in running your business, and I start talking about, well, in my business, this, whatever, you can say, but, oh, hang on a minute, Gerry. I'm not sure that would work. A better approach would be this. So that you're not poo-pooing what I'm planning, but you're helping me address the issues I have so that my plan has a much better chance of success.
I love it. I didn't know you were going to say that point, but I wasn't going to let this episode end without talking about that one, because especially, sorry to jump in there, with the year that we're having and farmers facing massive drought on top of mini droughts or multiple years of droughts, at some point you just want somebody to talk to. This, maybe not your wife or your husband, that might be before talking to the banker. And that would be a farm business consultant, right? A farm business.
Yeah.
That's the correct word, right? I was going to ask you, because there's going to be people in our audience, unfortunately, that are having a very, very hard time. And they're sitting at home and spinning. Like you said, they're stuck. They know there's a problem. We're hoping it's going to change magically, but they don't know where to go. What do you do? And you just spin and you spin and you spin. And oh my gosh, not only does that not solve the problem, but that's not going to help our mental health. So who is there to help farmers when they're going, man, I can't pay the bills? Right?
Exactly. Yeah. And the train left the station.
Well, I'll keep talking. So you are in this industry, Gerry, and for the people in the audience that might be relating to that and going, oh my gosh, yeah, like I don't want to sell the farm. I'm not at that point. It's not a lost cause, but it's not good. I mean, the next step would be to talk to the banker. But it doesn't hurt to go to the banker with a plan and have your own plan, because that's your business. So if there is somebody in the audience, how do they find farm business consultants?
Well, let me just comment further on what you just said.
Okay.
And I heard a statistic not that long ago that said something along the lines of farmers with a written business plan
Yes.
have a 40% better chance of success than if you don't have a written business plan. So write it down.
Yeah.
It shouldn't just be up here. So write it down and have that. And that's where, again, a business advisor can help you flesh out this plan so it makes sense and it's realistic. But there is, and actually the federal government has, it's called Farm Debt Mediation Services. And unfortunately, Farm Debt Mediation Services, and quite frankly, I know this from personal experience, I was appointed to the Manitoba Farm Debt Mediation Board in 2000. And just when I heard the name, it's go, oh, okay, I'm going to be dealing with farmers that are going broke. Kind of, that was a cold, calloused look I had at it. But as I started doing that work, I realized more and more that that was a beautiful tool for farmers to utilize when they had questions about their debt. You talked before about debt.
Okay.
And so it's something that there's not necessarily any implications for. It's a free service that farmers can use. An expert comes in, they call them field experts, but it's really along the lines of a farm business consultant, like you just talked about, comes in, compiles the financial statement with you, talks through your projections, talks through ways of addressing what your concerns might be. And it's a beautiful tool for farmers to use. But what I was going to say before is actually farmers are also inherently hesitant to use money for what they feel aren't necessary expenses, right? I do conflict management work. You've had a lot of experts on regarding succession planning. I had a farmer call me a few years ago and said, well, our family's going through this and there's conflict and we need help. What's it going to cost? Well, I said, it's probably going to cost you $5,000. Oh, we can't afford that. And I said, you've just told me that you have a $3 million farm that's going to fall to pieces if you don't fix this issue, right? And he went, oh, yeah, okay.
Yes.
Right.
Yes.
And so sometimes, again, spending some money on that expert advice is going to help in spades, as it were.
And you know, the funny thing too, I always say I'm bridging the mainstream business world with agriculture. In the entrepreneurial space and the startup and mainstream business, it is cool and trendy and almost required to have a consultant or a coach. Like, that's the thing to do. It's so popular. And that person's there to guide you through, help you with your weak spot. But then now, okay, I take that Tracy hat off, that part of me that knows that, and put my farmer hat on and go, that's not what we do. Why would I talk to a consultant about our farming operation, right? When these are experts that know how to do this stuff, that are there to help you. And same thing, like you said, pay them a little bit of money and they can help fix some problems that are going to cost you massive down the road, or help you keep the farm that you don't want to lose. And, you know, I feel in my stomach, I'm the internal optimist, as most farmers are. I don't love talking about the negative stuff, but you know what? I'm here with this show and this platform to dig into the hard conversations. I don't want to just talk up here, because honestly, I know there are a lot of producers out there that are sitting there going, pardon the language, crap. I'm sure they're saying a few other words I won't put on here, but there's a lot of guys out there, guys and gals going, okay, what do I do?
Yeah.
And the point of this show is to help give tools.
Yeah. And, you know, I talked to a farmer a few years ago, and farmer I knew well, and he had taken over the family farm, and by all appearances, he seemed to be successful, and it had been a difficult year. And I was talking to him in fall, and I said, well, us as farmers, we're resilient, and you know what, there's always next year, right? And he very quietly said to me, I'm not sure there will be a next year. And it's just like whammo, right? There was someone that was facing the reality of perhaps losing it all. And so I think, just like you say, we can withstand one crisis, we may be able to stand another crisis, but when they start piling up, and when that drought hits the third or fourth year, suddenly that song changes. And it's incredibly sad. But my message to people, whether it's financial issues, whether it's mental health issues, is there is hope and there is relief. And sometimes that relief comes in a different form than we had ever expected, but it's there. And we need to make sure we avail ourselves of the help that's out there to get that relief.
Yeah, those are great words. Yeah, I was happy to bring you on the show right now, especially because of some of the stuff I've been hearing. I don't even want to repeat it because a lot of it's heartbreaking and devastating. So, honestly, I'm going to have the uncomfortable conversation right here, because many producers don't even think about the help or the services that are provided. And then once we know about what's available, there's the helping ourselves get over ourselves to seek the help, right?
You know what, Tracy? Sorry, I'm going to jump in there.
Please.
In 2006, at Christmas time, we had hit the depths of our financial stressors. And I looked at my wife and I said, if I could pack my suitcase and walk down the lane and not have to worry about any of this crap again, I would be so happy. And she said, well, hang on a minute. And I was farming together with a brother, and he said the same thing. He says, no, we're going to work our way through this. And yeah, you know what? It took a year, but we did work our way through it. And I did leave with just a little bit more than just a suitcase. I left with a relationship intact. I left with my kids. And so there are so many things that are so important to us that we don't see because of the misery we're experiencing.
Yeah. Yes. And you want to take an action and rip the Band-Aid off, right?
Yeah. Get it over with.
Yeah. You're, between thinking of a story I just heard yesterday and hearing your story, I was almost getting teary, Gerry. We're okay here on our farm. Thankfully, we're in a pocket where we just got the rains when we needed. We were so lucky, but I know so many people are hurting. And you know what? At the end of the day, the farm is the farm. The farm is a thing. Our lives are more important than the farm. Yes, everybody out there wants to keep the farm and farm again next year. But at the end of the day, we're not the farm, right? I know.
Yeah, but far too often, things like the farm, our physical assets, we think we're defined by them.
Yeah.
But we're not.
I know. I said, this is a little raw. But I said to Anthony, we were driving and he was telling me about a story about a beef farmer. I'll just leave it at that. And what was going on. And it wasn't good by any means. And he wanted to take action that is very permanent and devastating to rid himself of the pain. And I looked at Anthony and I said, I love the farm, but if anything ever went south, that I don't care, right? And there's so many people that are facing that right now. Oh my gosh, I've never got teary on an episode, I don't think. It just hurts to hear.
It does. And you're absolutely right, Tracy. There are a lot of farmers out there right now that are well, they're probably busy today combining, but in a month or two, they're going to feel like they're at the end of the road.
Yeah.
And that's where mental health really plays an important role in trying to be as healthy as you can be mentally to make the decisions that need to be made.
Yeah. Oh, great words of wisdom. Can we end this before I start crying? Oh,
You know
I gotta
what?
laugh to get rid of the emotion. Oh, yeah.
I know. But again, Tracy, and I appreciate you taking us down that road because that's the reality.
Yeah.
And
I don't want to talk about it. I didn't want to bring it up, but why ignore? And if somebody can listen to this and hear the tools that you have to offer and go, oh yeah, I'm not the farm. It's going to be okay, right?
You know, Tracy, the very first episode you and I did, and you can edit this out later if you want, but the very first one we did, which is it's actually maybe almost 3 years ago, is when I told my story to you at the Fort Gerry in Winnipeg.
Yes.
And that episode played. And again, it's just sometimes I talk about it and go, well, yeah, whatever, maybe it helped something, maybe it didn't, who knows.
Oh, it did.
But I got a message that a couple of days after where a gentleman in Saskatchewan said, you know what, I was driving down the road listening to that podcast, and he said, I started crying. I had to pull over because I felt for the first time for a very long time, I can't remember how long, he said, for the very first time, I actually think there's hope for me now.
Oh.
And so don't apologize for going where you're going because, like you said before, it may help someone.
Yeah.
And if it helps one person find some relief and find help, it's worth it.
Amen. That's why I do this. Put the hard conversations on the shoulder so other people have the resources they need, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. Gerry, this has been a great conversation. Have you shared everything you wanted to cover today?
Oh, I could talk for another 2 hours if you want.
We have that. I was going to say we have that problem, but I was going to say we have that gift.
No, I'm good. You know what, Tracy? www.gerryfriesen.ca. People can find me if they want to reach out, give me a call, send me an email. I will gladly communicate with them.
Okay. I want to expand on that. If a farmer is having a tough time mentally, financially, are you a place they can go that you can help guide them through?
Yeah,
I know
absolutely.
We do more ag and resources there, but if somebody's listening, they can contact you. You're okay with that?
Yes. And here, if anybody that's listening to this feels like, maybe it hit a nerve, or maybe it created some awareness. If you can, and I suspect it's probably online, I always carry copies of it around with me when I go places, but FCC has a publication called Rooted in Strength.
Okay.
And it's an incredible little booklet. And in the middle of it is what they call a dashboard. And you can kind of go through different, it kind of, and I don't have one handy here to say exactly what it is, but you go through that. It's very simple. And at the end of it, you go, yeah, you know what? Stress is really affecting me. And if that's what you come up with, there's some anecdotal stories in there, but there's also resources in there for where you can seek help. That's an incredibly important document or a booklet, publication, call it what you may. And it's called Rooted in Strength. And your local FCC offices have copies of it.
Perfect. Thank you for sharing that. And thank you so much for spending your time, sharing your wisdom, being vulnerable, sharing your story, helping me almost cry. Jokes aside. Okay, are you catching on with my coping mechanism here? I need laughter to get out of my pain.
Absolutely. And if I was going through personal stress management tips, laughter is one of the first ones I would mention, Tracy. We need to laugh.
Yeah. I agree. And you know what? I just feel for the farmers out there. I appreciate you spending the time. So thank you as always, Gerry. Your time is cherished here on the show.
Anytime, Tracy. I appreciate it and enjoy it.
Wonderful. Thanks, Gerry. And thank you in the audience. If you enjoyed this episode as much as I did, please like it and share it out there so other farmers can hear this message. Honestly, guys, now more than ever, farmers need to hear the information that Gerry just shared. So like it, share it, get it out there. I'd greatly appreciate it. See you next week. Bye-bye.
You've been listening to Impact Farming. For more great episodes and articles designed to help you manage and grow your farming operation, head on over to farmmarketer.com. Don't forget to sign up while you're there. We will see you on the next episode.